Hello everyone, I'm KM Weiland and welcome to this week's writing Q&A video. As you can see, I'm in a slightly different location this week. I gave myself a month-long writing retreat in the mountains for my birthday. So as you can see, I'm keeping up with content and now I just have to do the writing part of the writing retreat. But I'm having a lot of fun. It's really beautiful here. So this week's question is from Jessie Hermit. She says, my writing sounds more like liner notes than a well-developed story. How do I change that? So this could be resulting from a lot of things. I'm assuming that what is being indicated in this question has to do with there not being a lot of life in it, kind of like more of a staccato representation of what's happening rather than something that's, feels three-dimensional and is breathing with life. And really, this is the whole art and craft of narrative fiction. You can be a fantastic storyteller, you can understand plotting, you can understand structure, but if you're going to write novels or short stories or something like that, you have to be able to bring it all to life through the prose. And I don't know, I can't speak for everyone obviously, but I would think many people would also resonate with this when I say that when I am searching for a book to read from an author who I don't know, obviously I can't tell just from flipping through and looking at, a few excerpts here and there if they can, land the story, which is obviously super important because that's what creates the experience we're looking for and what we'll remember. But if I'm just like doing the test, and deciding is this somebody that's going to captivate me enough for me to sit down and read it, then that test is pretty much entirely based on how the prose sounds. If it comes across as someone who has really mastered the ability to bring a story to life through their prose. So that is definitely something that's very important to master. But it's not an easy skill. It's a very complex skill that's made up of a lot of different parts. More parts than I can definitely go into in a short 5-6 minute video. But I will leave lots of links below on some of these topics if you want to go deeper. One of the simplest and main things that will bring your story to life is voice. And voice is an extremely abstract concept that is also very subjective and personal to the writer and sometimes even to the individual book. And there's so many different styles. You can have somebody who's very staccato and straightforward and it works beautifully. But in another story, that's not going to work and you want something much more lush or conversational or something like that. But voice is definitely something to think about. James Scott Bell, I remember in an article in Writer's Digest many years ago, he talked about the three necessities of good fiction, and he called them grit, wit, and it. And to me, voice is the it factor. It's, if I'm reading, I open a book and it jumps at me, it's usually because of the voice. But like I say, voice is made up of many different components. So one of the components that's definitely important for this is having a vision for your story, understanding, what you're trying to convey via the voice. Because you could be telling, some different writers could tell the same story, and in their different hands, it might be satirical, it might be tragic, it might be macabre, it might be, very evocative and lush in the sensory descriptions. So it really is important for you to understand what you're trying to achieve as you're crafting a voice for yourself as an author and for any specific book or character that you're working with. And part of this inevitably is a mastery of your native language, or whatever language you're writing in. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be writing, in perfect grammar, but understanding that, and more than that, understanding the rhythm and cadence that creates dialect. Whether you're, writing in what you would consider a normal dialect or one that's very specialized for your story. Mastering that, there's a level of authenticity that just pops in an author's voice when they're able to evoke that in a story. And a lot of that, just in my opinion, the most valuable thing you can do to learn and craft your own specific authorial voice is through osmosis, is just reading widely, listening, paying attention and understanding, just getting that intuitive feel, for what works so that that's able to come out for you on the page. However, the single most important technique of any of these, and there are many more that would contribute obviously to great narrative prose, but in my opinion, the single most important technique is simply show versus tell. And if you are feeling like your writing, your prose, your novel is, more like liner notes, and it's just lacking that life, very often it's because you are telling the story rather than showing. And the simple explanation of what this is telling is, me sitting here telling you how to, write a story. It's more informative. It's like if you're sitting there at the restaurant with your friend and they're telling you a story, it may be a really big story, but they're done in maybe 3 minutes. And that's usually a sign that you're telling, versus showing, in which, every detail is drawn out so that you get to what we all want to create in a reading experience, which is really a full body experience for readers, where their brain just lights up and they're able to see and they're able to hear, maybe smell and taste, and certainly feel the world and the character, and get lost just in the depth of realism that you're evoking in your story. And the way you do that ultimately is by describing those details. And there's an art and a balance to this, because obviously you can't describe everything. For me, when I was first trying to figure out show versus tell and understand how to do this, the kind of the breakthrough for me was when I started looking at showing as summarization, looking at telling as summarization and showing as dramatization. So both are necessary in a story. Sometimes you want to summarize. But if you feel like you're summarizing what happens in a scene versus like really going into the details. And a simple example of this would be, I walked my dog, right? Very straightforward, but that would, generally speaking, be telling, versus, something more evocative, like, I am walking down a leaf-strewn path and the orange leaves blow across the road, and my dog suddenly stops, and I smell too to see what he's smelling, and it's a skunk. Something more in that vein. Obviously that's not what you'd want to write in your story, but something where you're going into the sensory details and evoking that. And again, that's something that I think osmosis and just really studying, paying attention to how that is done in novels. When I was first starting out, something I would often do is copy out pages from books. And it helps you just kind of dial in and really notice how the words are being put together and how they're functioning. So again, this is a tremendously complex topic. Hopefully some of this was helpful, or kind of gave you a few little ideas of strings to pull for moving forward in expanding this very important technique within novel writing. But I will leave quite a few links down below to everything that I've talked about, with lots more information, because these are all pretty deep topics that we can go pretty deep on. So I hope that was helpful. And if you have a question that you would like me to answer in next week's video, please leave that down below. If you would like to stay connected with me and make sure you don't miss any of my content, whether it's these videos or my weekly blog and podcast, then the best way to do that is to stop by my site at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com and sign up for my mailing list. You can find the sign up form either in the sidebar, or also it's at the bottom of every single post. So I hope to see you around, and I will be sharing another video next week.